Welcome to another session of Technology by Performance. I'm Ken Umansky, your host, for another exciting journey into the world of technology. My guest today is Chris Machut, founder and CEO of SiteTrax, an AI-powered intermodal asset tracking venture, reshaping the bedrock of supply chain data generation. As a thought leader and idea synthesizer, Chris contributes significantly to the logistics community. He's led the discussion on pivotal supply chain topics ranging from data standardization to effective AI utilization. He's a graduate of Virginia Tech and is devoted to reshaping the logistics landscape through innovation and collaboration. Wow, Chris, that's really a lot for me to say. Welcome,
Mouthful.
and I'm really finally happy that we could corral you to be a guest on technology. Just for the audience standpoint, Chris and I have talked a lot about AI and how it applies to logistics and other categories. And I'm really happy that he could join us today because I think you'll learn a lot and so will I. So let me start with the first question. How is artificial intelligence employed in the supply chain area?
Well, thank you, Ken, for having me today. Jumping straight into it on the how I like to describe it as how does AI and logistics um, affect the supply chain? And I would say we would focus and start from the dirty little secret in logistics is nobody knows where their stuff is. There's a lot of words, and I use it lightly, words around AI and how it's used nowadays. I'm really surprised yet there hasn't been an AI drink because everyone claims that AI is here to either destroy the world or save the world. Everyone's claiming they can do it, and everyone's claiming that they have the solution to implement it.
I think the
At the end of
alcoholic beverage category is trying to get an AI drink, by the way.
an AI drink would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I view AI as the in between, not taking over the world and not just a fallacy or something that is not realistic. It's a tool. It's another utility. And when it comes to logistics, which is where we focus on, is facilitating and using AI to make work better for human beings. And if you were to take that from a macro, even higher level than logistics, that's really what AI should be. A lot of people are applying AI where it's not needed, outside of alcoholic beverages in this case. But the primary focus where AI really reigns supreme is in areas that makes human beings' lives more productive, more effective, uh, safer, just all those things in business. Whenever you create a new widget, you're ultimately trying to accomplish. And that's where my background comes in. I've started as a computer engineer, Virginia Tech, several decades ago, and have been a serial entrepreneur since. That journey has led me to being very intimate with big machines and big business and how they move things and how ultimately they cannot see, from the operator not being able to see the equipment that they're operating to management not knowing where these machines are moving these assets. Um, the need for AI came one day. We had one of our customers about 8 years ago that was using one of our camera systems that basically said, "Hey, can't you just tell me where my operator moved that item?" And, well, why? And I didn't run their business. We just knew that the operators were blind. We didn't understand the end game goal. He goes, "Well, I don't know that he moved that from point A to point B." Kind of sat there for a minute. When, but isn't that your job as his manager? Analogy that I could best think of is you go to a grocery store and not know that you put the milk on the milk shelf and the bread on the bread shelf, and that the shelf is fully stocked with that bread. As a consumer, we all think, yeah, big machines moving big stuff around. Everybody knows where their stuff is. No, they don't. Walmart does a good job at it. Amazon does a good job at it. Your local grocery store does a good job at it. But when it comes to the business of supply chain, they don't know where their stuff is. This is where AI can come in and help facilitate it. And it just has taken me down a rabbit hole that has been amazing so far.
Okay. So we're learning something already. How do you see the future of AI when it comes to logistics and supply chain, more importantly?
Starting with that original narrative of AI being a tool, supply
Hmm.
chain, not really knowing where their stuff is. We found that it's not just the data that's the problem. So, data being AI being able to produce data, but then what do you do with that data after you find out where your stuff is? Businesses struggle with being able to make effective decisions in their operations, primarily because they get bad data. Bad information leads to bad decisions. AI's capability, be it computer vision, which is an area that we primarily focus on in terms of take pictures of assets, allow the customers to take pictures of their assets, identify by simply taking a picture of it, the ID of that asset, GPS coordinates, and a timestamp. But that data is useless if you collect tens of thousands of these records and you can't act upon it. So just because you produce the data with computer vision doesn't mean that AI stops there. There's other areas of AI. And AI is actually a very dangerous word because there is no such thing as AI, at least in today's current state, where people, when we were talking, when I mentioned earlier, the take over the world aspect, uh, that can do everything. AI is the absolute worst generalist. It is the best specialist when it comes to its different capabilities. So a lot of what's been in the news and the press lately over the last year, 18 months has been Chat GPT. It is another kind of AI, an AI that is a large language model that allows us to use natural speech. That has nothing to do with computer vision, which is interpreting or creating, in the supply chain, they like to refer to it as a digital twin of an object. So the digital representation of a real world object. Very different implementations at the end of the day, but very useful data for different use cases.
So give me an example in the real world about how you're using AI to help, the mid-size or good-sized business to keep track of what's happening in the logistics and supply chain world for them.
We found really quickly was when we had started with I mentioned the cameras and putting them on big machines so people could see in the blind. We found really quickly how they were doing their data entry of reporting what they were doing were literally post-it notes. They might be at the end of the day getting out of the machine. They moved 90 rolls of steel, 100 containers, getting out and doing their best guess to go tell an office manager, literally playing, remember the old telephone game?
Mm.
Playing the telephone game from their own brain of what they did for the previous 8 hours in terms of where all that stuff was located. You can imagine how highly inefficient that is if you had to move 80 different items, 90, whatever it is, a whole bunch of items. And after 8 hours, go and tell someone else what you just did. I can barely remember what
Yeah,
I did 5 minutes ago.
right. Well, you mentioned something to me about how it's being used in the container world.
Mhm.
To move product, around the world. Explain a little bit about that because I think our audience would really like to hear that.
So, with a specific aspect of containers in the supply chain, containers, especially global supply chain, 90% of the global supply chain is actually driven by what's called an intermodal container. There's a lot of other terms for this. I'm going to call it an intermodal container for right now. but they'll call it marine boxes, Connex boxes. You may have heard all different types of terms. The specific kind of container we help businesses find in the supply chain is an ISO standardized container that actually has a unique ID on all sides of it. That particular container, you can imagine moving 90 of those in a day in your yard, sometimes hundreds, if not thousands. It just depends on the size of the yard or the port. You can imagine moving those around your facility of having to manually write that down. With our solution, all our customers have to do is either mount a camera or pull out their cell phone and download the SiteTrax app and take a picture of it. That instance of capturing that object, be it taking a picture of it, scanning a yard and driving through a yard and just setting the cell phone in the window, or using humorously call it a camera on a stick, our SiteTrax virtual gate. Pretty much any camera can identify the time, the ID, and the type of asset, being a intermodal container and not like a car, a human being, or a cat, and accurately identifying the ID that's on that container, the timestamp, and the location, or also referred to the geolocation of that asset within the facility. Using a camera is, in the AI terminology, and interpreting the data of what the camera sees, is computer vision. That computer vision then takes it another step, which you then drive that data from computer vision into what's called optical character recognition, object detection, and other computer vision-based algorithms. And I'd like to actually call AI more an algorithm than AI, because AI is just so all-encompassing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, our workflow for our customers is allowing them to do inventory checks, yard checks, knowing things come in and out of the facility, knowing that they dropped off, proving that they were picked up, identifying where they are in their yard, and having complete inventory analysis of all the 18 different truckers that came in there each day without having to manually go through that facility, counting everything, writing everything down, having to stand at that gate and just go, yep, container ABC 123 just came through the gate.
Can they now find that container as it's being shipped too? Meaning when it gets on a ship or when it gets delivered to a port?
Yeah, and that's really our push at SiteTrax. So right now, in terms of the dirty little secret in the supply chain, is nobody knows where their stuff is. That extends to anything not on the ship. So a lot of and they call them intermodal data aggregators. So you have all these carriers. They could be a ship, they could be a railroad, or they could be a trucking company. Vast majority of these intermodal data aggregators that will take these intermodal containers, aggregate the data, and then tell people where their stuff is, they're effectively just tracking a ship. It's not hard to track a ship that has, and they call it AIS, for those that are not familiar with the maritime systems of tracking things. It's not difficult to track something the size of a city. It's pretty difficult to track it when you have tens of thousands of those containers then in a port that the ship offloaded to, and then it gets spread out like cockroaches in 5,000 different directions, be it on rail or on truck. That's the term intermodal that facilitates it, that one box can go from a ship to a railroad to a truck. They call that point the interchange. When that interchange happens at that port and it goes on rail or truck, at least 50% of the time, it goes into a deep, dark black hole that nobody knows where it is. And at the end of it, it magically will appear at the business's facility, ready to be interacted with. Hey, did you know that it was showing up and you had to have your staff ready to get it? Did you know it was even dropped off in your yard and that it arrived? Did you know where it was at any point in time so you could actually operate your business, make plans accordingly, and just make people's lives less chaotic of being able to do their jobs?
Okay. Now you can track it though.
Now you can track it. Yep.
Okay.
And with a device as simple as a cell phone with a camera, which vast majority of people on the planet have nowadays.
So let me ask you a question about the challenges and problems you see moving forward with the technology you're talking about in the utilization of AI.
The futures of AI, in what AI can do in the area that we're knowledgeable about, which is the uh, computer vision aspect and creating that digital twin I referenced earlier, is our focus is around the good data. What's exciting, Ken, if you recall, I think when you and I were talking earlier, you put crap in, you get crap out.
Right.
Um, we're all about empowering a good foundation of data for people to act upon. People in the business of moving intermodal assets, including the chassis and everything else around those devices that are around those systems that require the supply chain to work. When you
Mm-hmm.
start with good data, you can start making good decisions.
Right.
Good
Absolutely.
decisions such as some of my favorite are reducing trucker turn times. So there's a vast majority of truckers in this, especially here in the U.S., that are mom and pops, and if they're coming into a facility and dispatch is saying, "Yeah, pick up container ABC in the back nine," and he goes whatever that terminology, they tend to use their own terminology for where things are, and he goes back and looks, I'm using air quotes, the back nine, and can't find container ABC 123, he's not making any money when he's doing that. He could spend 45 minutes doing that. And that can be incredibly frustrating. And it's hitting his bottom line. He's expending all that gas, he's expending all his time. But then think about the gas side. There's states like California that only allow truckers to emit but so much in emissions. So yes, there's a potential legal impact of those emissions, but day to day, I don't want my planet having any more fuel cranked into the air, or exhaust into the air than is necessary. It's not just that frustration point on the trucker, and also then on the customer who's receiving that load and getting the load delayed, but there's that environmental impact. There's like a trickle down effect that when your business is able to start working on good data, you can then feed that into other algorithms, as I referred to before, and make better decisions in the business.
Okay. Well, Chris, we're running out of time, but thank you for sharing with us your experience, the practical application of the technology that you're currently using, and what's going to happen in the logistics category moving forward. It's been interesting. I think it's been a learning experience for me, and I think my audience. How can our listeners contact you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, reach out anytime. Our website is sitetrax.io. That's SiteTrax.io with www on the front. My email is also just chris@sitetrax.io. That's CHRIS at SiteTrax.io. You can also look me up on LinkedIn for those of you that are a fan. Chris Machut, spelled Machut. Thank you so much.
Chris, thanks again. And remember, if you need help with any size technology challenge, please contact Performance Business Solutions at performancebiz.com. Again, I'm your host, Ken Umansky. Until we meet again on another technology podcast, keep innovating.